The title of this panel is Unleashing European Artificial Intelligence Leadership in Strategic Sectors, and we will focus on healthcare area. At the same time, there are discussions on mobility and different kind of issues. It's the part of the Center for Data Innovations European Artificial Intelligence Policy Conference. It has started in the morning with a presentation of the Deputy President of the European Parliament, Dita Haraznova. My name is Michal Boni, PhD, former member of the European Parliament, former Minister of Digitization in Poland, now related to Center in Brussels and Warsaw Private University, SWPS, University for Social Sciences and Humanities. I'm the host and moderator of this session, and just a brief information to the audience. You can ask questions in the session stage chat on the right side of your screen, and I think that we all will observe this chat. If we will find some especially to persons or very important to our discussions, and of course, if we will time in the last part of our debate, of our panel, so we will be ready to respond to those questions. Starting our panel, I want to say that there are three key points. Firstly, we are living in the special digital acceleration period under the COVID circumstances, and I think it's on the one hand, of course, very dramatic experience for all populations, but on the other hand, there are many new opportunities because we are using digital instruments, digital tools in many areas. Especially, I think it turned out that digital solutions are important for healthcare area and artificial intelligence also. The point is related to the problem of data, and I think that we will focus on it, because when we are discussing about artificial intelligence in healthcare area, we need to discuss about preparation of artificial intelligence. It means quality of data, accessibility of data for making the good results, but also we need to discuss how to collect the data, how to make the retention, and on the other hand, because very often health data are very sensitive, so we need to discuss about a special security of this data. It's related to the, if I can say, material security, but on the other hand, it's related to the privacy security, and the European General Data Protection Regulation is also very, very important. As you probably know, last week, the European Commission presented the Data Governance Act. So it is very important because it will build the new model of governance of the data, how to use the data, how to make them secure. And the last point is related to understand how important is collaboration when we are talking about artificial intelligence and healthcare. Collaboration between patients, you know, this is a very famous expression in the European Union, human-centric artificial intelligence. So in our discussion, we can use the expression patient-centric artificial intelligence. And of course, this is important, but not only patients. We have clinicians, we have physicians, and on the other hand, we have business and providers of many services. So I think we need to discuss how to build trust between them, and on the other hand, how to use this collaborative power to make artificial intelligence solutions in the healthcare area much more efficient and effective in a short time. So this is a brief description of our discussion today. We have, again, good morning to all of you. We have excellent panelists, and I want to present. This is Matthias Goyen, Professor Matthias Goyen, currently the Chief Medical Officer Europe for General Electric Healthcare. Matthias is responsible for leading GE healthcare medical, clinical, and evidence generation strategies for product modalities in Europe. And of course, many experienced person together with the leadership team of the hospital in Hamburg. Matthias established some years ago a comprehensive cancer center linking clinical medicine with new oncologic research strategies. So it is a very good background for our discussion. Welcome. We have in our discussion today Daniel Natrat, co-founder and CEO of Ada Health, Chief Executive Officer, as I have said. This is a global digital health company making personalized health accessible for all. Daniel is an entrepreneur, but on the other hand is very supportive for many startups trying to start the area of digital health. We have, it is very important, Seri Thompson, Deputy Head of the eHealth Wellbeing and Aging Unit from DigiConnect European Commission, of course. Seri has previously worked for DigiSanda and Eurostat, so I think she understands all aspects of digital health in the European Union, also from the perspective of as a human patient, but of course as a representative of very important institution. And last but not least, we have Jason Tamara Vidia. I'm not sure if it is well spelled, but I'm sorry.
Close enough, thank you.
Okay. Associate Director, Foundational Data and Analytics, Artificial Intelligence, MSD. He is, we can say, multidisciplinary technology leader, trying and making dual responsibilities of leading large and diverse data science team in MSD's technology hub in Singapore. But on the other hand, he is very active at the public area with many articles, papers, interviews, and popularization, if I can say, of that area. So I think that now we are ready to start. We will start with the first round of our discussion. After that, we will see what kind of topics will be much more hot during our discussion, and we will be ready to come back to those topics. We will start with Matthias. As we all know, artificial intelligence supports healthcare in general, but the pandemic accelerated the application of artificial intelligence, improving current approaches for prevention and treatment of infectious diseases. It is clear that artificial intelligence and data approaches can help us fight diseases in a new way, much more effective and with much more personalized solutions. Could you present some concrete examples of using artificial intelligence and data to improve diagnosis and support therapies for patients? Please, because we need to start with benefits of artificial intelligence.
So thanks a lot for the question, Michael, and the introduction. First of all, I agree with you. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a clear wake-up call that the entire industry needs to build and invest in a modern digitalized healthcare infrastructure. And when we listen to hospital CEOs and we listen carefully, they tell us that they have progressed more in the last 6-7 months in their thinking about mobile and virtual health than they had expected to in the next couple of years. But if you look at patients, their attitudes are also changing. Think of yourself. Patients don't necessarily want to go into a provider for a real physical visit if a virtual visit could work just as well. And so I think that COVID-19 in many ways has made clinicians more open to kind of embracing new technologies that can help them work better and smarter. And I think we have to use that momentum, so to say. And this is important. It is strategy and not technology that drives digital transformation. So we're talking about a change management process, a real paradigm shift. I'd say that we need the entire organization to buy into, the clinicians, the IT department, the technical staff. People must be really committed. You need ambassadors, if you will, or change agents within the organization who are not only ready to get used to the new environment, but actively promote it internally. And I can tell you, from a clinician's and radiologist's perspective, all these efforts are only accepted if it doesn't get more complicated. The irony is that while this technology is designed to help productivity initially, it can actually add more work and complexity. The best AI application, and I'm coming to the examples now, is the one that is invisible, that is seamlessly integrated into the workflow, unfolding its magic in the background, right? We have, for example, a workflow management system for the radiologist that simplifies the selection and usage of AI. The radiologist doesn't even know that AI is working. They just realize that the work list is prioritized and that their tasks are completed more efficiently. It's like an invisible friend helping you run faster, right? Let me give you another example. We are embedding AI capabilities right into our scanners, into our machines, into our ultrasound, our X-ray equipment. For example, we have a mobile X-ray system with a built-in AI solution that automatically analyzes images upon acquisition. For example, on the intensive care unit at 3 o'clock in the morning, right at the bedside, right? So the technician doing the scan knows directly if this is a patient whose images need to be seen right away by a radiologist. And so this is very important. It's not a question whether the radiologist is better than the technologist, than the AI, or the AI, outperforms the radiologist. In this case, it's just about prioritizing image review. Let me quickly give you one other example, and it's about the proper positioning of a patient for a CT exam. Sounds easy, right? I mean, why do we need AI for that? Well, positioning a patient is a real challenge. We have developed an AI-based solution for automatic positioning. This, first of all, makes sure that the patient is always in the best possible position for the exam. Just think of follow-up exams, repetitive exams that are much easier to read if the patient is always in the exact same position. And it also helps now in these COVID times, to reduce contact between the patient and the technologist. And this is very important these days. And just finally, and then I stop, a third example I'm really excited about. If you think of entire hospitals or even hospital networks, we have so-called clinical command centers that are able to find you an empty bed at 4 o'clock in the morning without the need to call all the wards, right? It can direct resources to areas of high need and give healthcare providers the critical need to best care for their patients. And it's a beautiful marriage, I would say, between artificial intelligence and human intelligence that are coming together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to detect risk and coordinate complex care. So, Michael, these were just a couple of real-life examples I wanted to share with you. There are many more.
Thank you very much. I think it was very inspiring. that at the end, this model of collaboration between artificial intelligence and humans, we can say that it is some kind of collective intelligence. And I think it's very important because, on the other hand, it's stopping some threats also among clinicians that artificial intelligence will replace them. This is the model in which they can cooperate, and the goal is to make the life of patients much more better. So coming back to those issues, I want to ask Jason, could you share with us your experience in using data for artificial intelligence? I have mentioned at the beginning the significance of quality of data. The models are all the data that powers the model, and data quality is important, but how we need to deconstruct data quality and talk about data that is not representative. And I think that because your experience, you can present some examples, some cases. And on the other hand, I want to ask you, could you elaborate the key layers related to the functioning of artificial intelligence: explainability, interpretability, and transparency. They are not the same, you know, of course, but on the other hand, it is important to build the ethical principles and also to start with building trust among patients. Jason, please, the floor is yours, or the camera is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And firstly, I apologize for not wearing a jacket because hi from Singapore, where the only season is summer, hot end summer. Also, I think the angle I want to take is working for a global technology function and how we might be able to give some insights on what we mean when we think about data quality. So if we are thinking about building an AI system and we say we want data quality, there's actually many points of failure. For instance, in data collection, we have sampling bias, and later on you want to label the data, and there are data quality issues in labeling, and then later on there's data quality issues in modeling, and so on. So a lot goes on beneath the hood there. And to give a more a day-to-day example, I once read a study on a survey on transport. Are you satisfied with the train system? And to take the data for that survey, people went to do a survey of people on the train. So obviously that doesn't work, because if you did not like to take the train, you would not be on the train at all. And so that's an example of sampling bias. So I think what I'm trying to put across is that there are many points of failure, and it's very hard for an external party to say, I want to audit these 10 points of failure. So what is the alternative? The alternative is these terms that we hear thrown around, and we hear terms like XAI, explainability, must be transparent, and so on. But maybe I want to take a more structured way of looking at it. And if you were a policymaker and I was an AI system developer, how do we bridge this gap? I think explainability is very much a technical field. So I want to create my models in such a way that you are able to understand the inner workings of my model. And there are many ways to do that, which I'll not go into detail, but I want to make my model explainable. But then explainable is not the same as interpretable, because if I make it so complex that you need a PhD in computer engineering to understand how the model works, even though it's explainable, it has no practical use. So it also needs to have some kind of calibrated level of being interpretable. And finally, we have not just a technical explainable layer, not just the business interpretability layer, but we also want a kind of organizational, whole of organization transparency layer to be very public on the data we collect, how it's used, and also, and this is particularly important only the past couple of years, also when someone's interacting with an AI system. Based on state-of-the-art research in certain AI deep learning models, it's now easier and easier to create the impression that you're interacting with a human being. AI systems that pass a Turing test without your knowledge. So it's very important to have that layer of a transparency that, do you know that right now you're not talking to a human being, but the control has crossed over to an AI system. So I think, I think that's the way I'll think about data pipelines as well as how we interact with data as an external party.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that we will have time also the second round to ask you about your work on ethical principles. But now I will move to Sherry Thompson, and we are discussing in the European Union, but also I think it is a very important reference point to globally about common European health data space. Could you share with us your view on the objectives of this initiative and how we should build the adequate institutional and legislative framework, proper infrastructure, semantic interoperability at the EU level, data governance, rules, guidelines on anonymization of data, proper using of GDPR. And from your point of view, what are real obstacles and how we should overcome those obstacles to start with the functioning. It is also important to remember that in the European Union, the health area is under the competences during the treaty, under the competences of member states. So if we want to create this European health data space, it requires many political activities to convince member states that they want to participate, to contribute in creating this. So what is your view on those issues?
Thanks very much. It's a lot to cover in a few minutes, so I'll have to give a run through of the major points that you mentioned. But I mean, first to say, as you have and as the other panelists have, how important the pandemic has been to create this widespread appreciation of the value of data and what it could do. And we've certainly seen this at European level. We've seen it in the development of vaccines. We've seen it in the development of the use of molecular data for fast drug repurposing. We've seen it in the greater ability to monitor the spread of the virus through the EU, and in many other ways. So of course, in the European level, what we're thinking is how can we help this? How can we, particularly help this transformation happen? And it's not a new thing. Of course, we've been thinking about this for a number of years, and we had a communication in 2018. And many that's still valid. And one of those aims of that communication was about really making the data available, increasing the accessibility of the data, with an understanding that, this is the heart of Europe being able to really capitalize on the digital transformation in all sectors. So, I mean, the aims are, as we've seen, and your panelists will know much better than I, of the great potential in terms of new treatments and medicines, every stage of the drug development process, discovery process, to improve the functioning of our health and care systems. And again, the COVID experience, we've seen a dramatic uptake in the telemedicine technologies. And also that that we need to make this data available to really capture this great groundswell of innovation that wants to come from many companies, many European companies. So one of the key ways we're thinking about supporting the process is simply about making the data available. So we have the data to test the artificial intelligence, to really take advantage of these new technologies around Internet of Things, high performance computing, and also, from the consumer perspective, particularly around the mHealth, the market for wearables, and so on. But we know there's a lot of challenges and obstacles that we have to overcome, as you mentioned, and we know that there's a need for more European data processing and storage solutions for data. There's fundamentally a need, particularly for the health sphere, to create the data sets in the first place, because, of course, unlike other data spaces, we're looking at across many sectors at this possibility of data spaces. Unlike the others in the field of health, it's really very much sensitive data that we're talking about. So a key aspect of the work is literally to bring those data sets together. And here we're working very on data sets such as electronic health records, genomic data, cancer imaging data, patient and disease registry data, for example. And beyond the data, we need to know we have to make the data flow. And we know that there's a lot of data languishing in public sector organizations, and this is causing, and this is not available. It needs to be brought out of these institutions and made available, but in a secure way that people can trust. Because I think if citizens don't trust the way that their data is shared, they're not going to want to be participatory in this process. And so that then comes on to the need for strong frameworks for trust. So as you've already mentioned, the GDPR, but also the frameworks around the cybersecurity, around e-privacy. And also, as you mentioned, part of the trust is in the issue of the quality of the data. So here, indeed, we have been, exploring and putting in place mechanisms to ensure that Europe is developing common technical specifications so we can make our health data sets interoperable between each other. And you mentioned, I think, as well, the Data Governance Act. Of course, this is something that's particularly keen to help the data flow in terms of the public sector organizations, so such as health data, sensitive data that's held by hospitals, for example. And it intends to do this by encouraging the creation of competent authorities who will govern how the data, the national data spaces, if you like, will curate and manage this data, and will work with these institutions and will work with the stakeholders necessary to do this and make this happen. So these are the main areas that I wanted to mention at the moment. Of course, I can go into a lot of details later on if that's of interest.
Thank you very much, Sari, because I think it was the good explanation of what is going on in the European Union. You have mentioned not only the work on European health data space, but also some efforts done in the area of genomic data, the rules for data flows, e-prescription, for example, telemedicine solutions, and health records. Yes, because this is a background to find some solutions. We have some questions in the chat, and I will come back to those questions after Daniel first view and first opinion. What is your opinion? How the COVID-19, we have mentioned it many times today in the discussion, experience and crisis have reshaped medical tech priorities, and do you see some new initiatives among startups related to this new situation? What is your view? And of course, because from the business side, when we are discussing in the European Union on regulations, for example, rules for European health data space, there is a question how to join the needs for some legislation, and on the other, the clear condition to ensure innovation. Yes. So, what is your view on those topics? Please, Daniel.
Thank you, Michal. So, yeah, first of all, I think as many have already said, COVID has been a catalyst which sort of accelerated adoption of certain types of innovation. Some people said within the last half year or so, we've seen things happen that normally would have taken 5 years or longer to happen, specifically in the field of telemedicine, of course. What we can see is that the willingness, especially of doctors, to interact with their patients remotely sort of has gone up significantly, partly just forced. And COVID obviously is a horrible thing, but if there's one positive side effect is that there has been more adoption of digital tools. I think the willingness on the patient side had always been there, but on the doctor side specifically, I think it needed a trigger event like this to sort of lead to more adoption. I mean, this conversation we're having right now via something like Zoom probably would not have happened in the same way if not for COVID, right? And this makes it more accessible to people. And what we do at ADA is really very much focused on giving people better access to healthcare. So we're not technically a telehealth company. We're very much focused on the AI space, but we give people the ability to do an AI assessment of their own health and to then get information on what to do next. Our app has been downloaded over 10 million times, and we're now the most rated and reviewed medical app ever worldwide. And right now, every 2 or 3 seconds, someone enters a case in ADA. And of course, you asked the question about the need for regulation versus letting innovation develop. I guess there's always a bit of tension between these two goals. On the one hand, of course, we need to make sure that we do protect consumers and patients as well as possible. On the other hand, and I'm saying this as a trained lawyer, regulators also have to be careful to not sort of stifle innovation by being overreaching and trying to address too many hypothetical scenarios early on, and thereby creating barriers to innovation. So I think it's very important to strike the right balance, because we're not operating in a vacuum. We're in Europe, and I think in Europe we have a heightened sensitivity for topics such as privacy and data protection, which is a good thing. But if we over-regulate too much in Europe, then people will just end up using solutions out of China or the US, which might provide a lot less protection than innovation coming out of Europe. So, I think overall it's really important to find the right balance. And from my personal perspective, the person to look at and to focus on is really the consumer, the patient. Also, when we're talking about interoperability and portability of data, my personal perspective is that we'll never achieve it if we wait for the makers of EHR systems to sort of make their systems interoperable with each other. For me, the right way to look at it is to give the patient a right to have access and to have portability for their own health record. And that's sort of the way to achieve interoperability ultimately.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just for a moment, look on the chat, because there are some interesting questions. The first one related to the possibility of usage artificial intelligence. So I'm addressing this question. I'm not sure for whom, but consider this question. And also, this is a question addressed to Matthias. Maybe you can clarify if are taking about general symbolic intelligence or neural network intelligence. So I think I hope that you will respond to this. And this is very general question on climate. How much increasing pollution should be considered as a critical impacting parameters healthcare system. So I think it is a question addressed to all of us. This is comment done by Ulysses Cotes to Daniel, that we should think about not free market solution, but responsible design. And also it was some suggestions about when we have talked about quality of data and our position as patients, readiness for sharing the data or not. It was also the question in the poll addressed to the problem of donating the data. I'm ready to donate the data if I will know that it will be useful for others. What is your comment about this? I will start with Matthias because it was clearly addressed to you, please.
Yeah, just very quickly, when we talk about AI, it's about machine learning and deep learning, so it's about neural networks. I can answer that very shortly, but very interesting what you just mentioned, donating data, and this is all about trust. And I fully understand that many people are less willing to share their data because they care a lot about data privacy, which is absolutely fine and which needs to be respected, of course. And the EU has already worked on ethical principles of AI, which we at G Healthcare have developed as well, by the way. And the EU has put data protection at the top of its agenda with GDPR. And I hope that this can be a good basis to create trust. And if I may just add that, this brings me to a term that is really dear to my heart, and this is trustworthy AI. AI needs to be explainable to each and every patient outside of this black box, I think, and you know, to allow for wider adoption and acceptance. And we need to provide this transparency so that patients really trust it. And as a radiologist who I am, I would want to have the ease of mind that a deep learning algorithm reliably supports me in the diagnosis that I deliver to a patient, and I want to know how this algorithm works, quite frankly. And in turn, as a patient, I would be much more confident if the diagnosis that I had received from my ultrasound exam, if I knew that this is not just based on one pair of eyes and the experience of one radiologist, but supported by an AI algorithm that has been trained on thousands of data sets, right? So the questions we all have to ask ourselves in this discussion is whether we want to be active players shaping this, or just followers, you know, take a passive role, and in the end, because there is no alternative, we have to do it but cannot shape it. I mean, if you like it or not, AI is here, and it is here to stay. This is not some science fiction story. It happens as we speak. And Mikhail, to your point, I don't get tired advocating for this hybrid model when it comes to AI and doctors. As you said, it's doctors plus AI and not doctors versus AI, because I truly believe that AI can augment the work of the radiologists to make them better doctors. AI can help us to see more and diagnose disease more accurately and faster. And quite frankly, AI can take care of the repetitive task and the boring task no one wants to do, thereby freeing up time for clinicians to interact at a human level with their patients. Because think of yourself. Patients are always looking for the human touch in medicine. You don't want to get your diagnosis from a computer. You want to talk, at least I would like to talk to, ideally a radiologist, because I'm biased, or a clinician, another doctor, because I think that the relationship, the special relationship between the doctor and patient will never disappear. So, and this is my final sentence here, my suggestion would be to responsibly embrace AI and not fear it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Daniel, what are your comments?
Yeah, I would really like.
Yeah.
I would really like to echo what Matthias said. It's never about replacing or substituting the doctor. We have the same perspective. It's about supporting the patient and the doctor along the patient journey, and basically freeing up doctors' time so they can be freed from sort of repetitive tasks and spend more time to be empathetic with the patients who really need them. And maybe just to add to the question about how do you see the usage of AI in telemedicine. So our perspective is that telemedicine is here to stay, and it's a great thing. It adds convenience for patients, but by itself, it doesn't really address the structural problem in healthcare that there aren't enough health workers. There's already a shortage of more than 7 million health workers worldwide. And in telemedicine, you still need one doctor for one patient at a time. So you save travel time, but it doesn't really address the structural inefficiencies. And that's why we think you need something scalable, like, I'm biased, of course, like we've built it, that can help give people sort of a first filter, a first access point in their care journey, to help them address the first questions and then give them a way to make an informed decision about next steps. And by doing so, we can also pre-inform the physician with the outcome of this AI pre-assessment. And again, this goes back to the theme that Matthias mentioned. It's really not about replacing, it's about supporting the journey, which is what we're doing, for instance, in our partnership with Sutter Health in the US. It's a health system in the Bay Area. We've done some experiments where people use our tool, which is embedded in Sutter Health's website and app, and basically go through a process that's like a good physician taking the patient history. And the outcome of that can then be shared with the physician who later sees the patient, whether in a telemedical or in a face-to-face context. And by already providing the physician with that, the physician doesn't start from a blank sheet of paper, but is already briefed. They see at a glance that this is the constellation of symptoms the patient is reporting. Based on this, these are the most likely diagnoses, and these are the next things I should investigate or examine to get to a confirmed diagnosis. In our tests, this saved like 3 to 4 minutes per appointment. And going back to the theme of freeing up valuable doctor time, this really helps because doctors can filter the easy cases out faster and then focus on the patients who need them more.
Yeah, thank you. Jason, I want to ask you, because there were some questions related to the quality of data and also this model of data donation. What do you think? And it was also the question presented by Dominic Schneider. How do you plan to tackle the challenge to have sufficient labeled algorithm training data for healthcare research available in Europe? But of course, when we are discussing about artificial intelligence and healthcare, we shouldn't discuss only about Europe, because some solutions have to be globally, to exist globally. Yes? So what is your view on those issues?
Thanks for the questions. And I think the one on high quality data is a very difficult one, because depending on the application, there are some applications which are less sensitive, and so in applications that are less sensitive, we can do technical things to create synthetic data, and that comes to our rescue in many commercial applications. But when it comes to an area with where the impact of a mistake is high, like in healthcare, that's something that we want to put those layers that I mentioned. When we want to check for bias, it comes in like in representation. It comes in many different dimensions, and so it's important to invest in data. And if you think about the spectrum of data collection, over in clinical trials, you have a very high cost for a very low amount of high quality data. However, if we go into things like like social media, it is very high volume but very low cost and very low quality. And so we have principles and safeguards on the kind of data we would use for certain use cases. And I think investing in high quality data is something that we can't get too far away from. However, for those of you who are more technically inclined, there are some new methods that will accelerate these data issues, and one that's worth looking at is known as federated learning. Federated learning is based on the difficulty of getting data in one place to train my machine learning model. As an alternative, federated learning allows the algorithm to almost visit different data sources without actually getting the data ownership centralized in one place. So it is tricky, and I think there are some experiments going on in the area, and it's not really ready for a kind of prime time sensitive applications yet, but I think there are technical approaches being trialed in that area.
Yeah, thank you very much. We will continue our discussion, but for Jason, look at what Ulysses Cortes said and has written on chat, because it is also inspiring for all of us. Seri, of course, we are discussing also about cooperation and trust. It was a question addressed to the possibilities of operationalize trustworthy and transparent artificial intelligence in a healthcare setting. Is there a one-size-fits-all approach? I think that not, but what is your opinion, and what kind of works we need to make in the perspective of 2 or 3 years to establish this new model and start real artificial intelligence presence in the healthcare area?
Oh, you're on mute.
Good.
Before I just a quick word on the because it was raised on this issue of people making their data available. This the Data Governance Act that the Commission adopted last week. That the proposal would actually do this. The regulation would make it easier for citizens to make their data available, and we do find that. That actually people have very different kind of profiles with regard to the extent to which they want to make their data available. And for example, patients who have particularly rare conditions or chronic conditions become much more interested in making their data available, because they can really see, they really have obviously a benefit from drugs being made, medicines being made for their condition as soon as possible, and they can see the value of sharing it in this way. So the idea would be that there would be the creation of entities called data altruism organizations that would be trusted organizations that would facilitate this collection of citizens' data across the member states as made available by them. So it's something to look for in the Data Governance Act, because it has improved that. It aims to support that idea. But as to your question on more generally on trust. Well, I mean, is there one size fits all? I think, I mean, at the European level, we're particularly interested in framework. So we are interested, you know, in what can we do that will make improved trust across. We're not working at the national level or the local level. So we, having mentioned, of course, we've already mentioned the frameworks around GDPR and privacy. I mean, and here we notice, for example, with the COVID pandemic is that, in fact, you know, when people wanted to share data, in fact, there weren't the established mechanisms to do so. So we had anecdotes of companies or researchers who wanted to, for example, bring together data from ICU centers across Europe, but for them it wasn't clear how they could do that in a way that would keep the trust. So I think there's clearly a need for the need to strengthen these mechanisms. And so in a way, some clarity of framework is needed to make sure that the innovators can feel they can take that step forward and work with data and know that they're doing it within frameworks that are secure and trustworthy. Otherwise, I mean, over the next 2 or 3 years, of course, we would hope to start the new multi-annual financial framework. We'd hope to see investments more into technical specifications, more into these techniques around anonymization and pseudonymization, and these are areas we're already working on in terms of projects under Horizon 2020. We have a collection, for example, of projects that are working on how to develop a repository of anonymized cancer images, which, you know, if successful, we would then try and scale up later on. And of course, in the context, particularly the very, very sensitive data like genomics, this is being able to share this in a trustworthy way is critical. And I think we're looking closely, obviously, at how you create, how you put in place a certain kind of technology infrastructure that will do this, but also the governance around that, what kind of agreements around that with different kinds of stakeholders to make sure that the sharing is happening in a trusted way. I mean, lastly, I wanted to mention, as this is a particular discussion about AI, is one of the policy initiatives the Commission is interested in data is this concept of testing and experimentation facilities, which it's looking at for different kinds of data spaces, including health, which would be a kind of, you know, large facility where we can make the data available, which then combine it with, for example, create access for innovators and combine the data with access to, for example, physical resources. So if you're testing an innovation that requires access to real world conditions, whether it's in in the hospital itself, or perhaps in a care home, that you could combine, and at the final stage of the development of your project, you could combine the data and the physical resources and see this final stage testing. So this is something that the Commission is exploring for ways to make data available to innovators in the coming few years. Thank you very much. It was also some points for the direction and the response to those questions which were addressed the problem of what we need to do in the perspective of 2 years, implementing artificial intelligence in the healthcare area. And we have 9 minutes, so I want to give you the floor, but on the other hand, I want to point out some topics, if I can say. Firstly, during the discussion was raised the question how to prepare controlled data sharing for social good. It was a question and it was a response also done in the chat by Jason. It is important, I think. Controlled data sharing for social good. We need to remember about the technicality of data sharing on the one hand, but on the other, on the purpose that this is for social good. So what is your opinion on that issue? Finally, I think it is important also to consider how we want to implement those solutions in the European Union, knowing and remembering that healthcare area is under the competences of member states. It was a question done by Valentino Grassi about Italy and about the local government's responsibilities. So how to organize it, yes? I think it would be addressed to Siri. And of course, the final point, because we have no time to consider it much more deeply, it means the problem of digital artificial intelligence literacy. Because it's crucial, yes? We are discussing about regulators, we are discussing about technologies, we are discussing about professionals on the medicine area, on the healthcare area, but we have discussed about patients. But what does it mean, this digital artificial intelligence literacy, and how important it is? So we have 1.5 minutes for all of you. Let's start with Matthias, please.
Okay, just in a nutshell, I truly believe that AI applications will become even more important looking ahead, because they are revealing their great benefits. It's greater productivity, faster availability, less administrative work, and the spatial separation of physician and patient. We are kind of undergoing a paradigm shift from why digital to why still analog, right? And if there is one good thing about COVID-19, and this has been mentioned before, that it has clearly shown us that we can quickly come together as an industry with our customers to accelerate innovation and making digital solutions in AI not something to fear, but hopefully a helping tool to really augment the work of the radiologist, the clinician, and in general enhance the work of healthcare professionals, right? And coming back to the EU, I think it's really great that we already see some governments to make heavy investments to improve their healthcare infrastructure. And now I have to kind of advertise a little bit for Germany. Germany is one example, as they, I don't know if you've heard it, recently launched the Future Hospital Act with more than 4 billion euro as investments. And quite frankly, I expect other EU countries to follow and create specific healthcare modernization programs. And final remark, if Europe wants to take part in the digital transformation in healthcare, it needs to create policies that enable this. And it starts and ends with how health data is managed.
Thank you. Thank you. Daniel, please.
Sorry, I was just responding to a question from the chat about the ITU and WA effort.
Yeah, I have seen it, yeah. Thank you.
We're quite involved in this work on sort of benchmarking AI solutions for symptom assessment. So we think it's important to have these frameworks and to collaborate with other industry players to get to objective benchmarking. And we think that can be a good basis for policymakers and regulators to also monitor the quality of the different products that are out there.
Yeah, thank you. And Jason?
Yeah, I think it's my closing thought. If you are going to form a group that will tackle this problem at an industry level, what comes to mind is a very close colleague of mine, where I lead a very technical group, and she leads our company's ethics group, who is very highly trained in multi-stakeholder relationships and so on. So I think if you take many steps away from AI, AI systems are very much optimizing machines. So with AI systems, doing things will get easier and easier, but doing the right thing is as hard as ever. So I think I would very much encourage that symbiotic relationship between AI engineers and developers, together with more ethics and design and social good-minded people to direct AI systems in the right place. And it's important for these groups to come together.
Thank you very much. It's expression symbiotic cooperation. I think it's very important in positive sense. Yes, Sari, you have the possibility to comment all of us. And what is your view on those topics, and what is the main objective now? How we need to be prepared, especially thinking about those difficulties related to the healthcare area under the competences of member states. Please.
Yes, I mean, on the issue of sort of the issue with healthcare systems, and I mean, I think the question was about really, how even will this uptake be across health and care systems? And I think it's very important that European level and we keep an eye on this issue in a way of kind of equity and the extent to which everyone can benefit from AI technologies. But it is the case that health and care systems are managed sometimes not just at the national level but at the regional level. It depends on how they've set up the government. Member states have set up the governance in their healthcare systems, and so as a result, they've often got, to a certain extent, different priorities. They've got different resource levels. So I think, and also even within a healthcare system, regardless of you're going to have some facilities such as I think the leading teaching hospitals which will probably see an uptake quicker because there's more resource and more power for research and clinical research, and they'll be interested to see the uptake more. So it's something we have to watch out for. I think some difference of uptake is inevitable. I think one of the things that will come on board in the next year or so is the launch of the new multi-annual financial framework when it's agreed by the member states, and then there will be many resources to support this transformation in health and the other sectors, whether it's through a kind of European led set of calls like Horizon Europe or the Digital Europe programme or the new EU for Health programme, or whether it's a kind of more member state driven approach to the structural funds, and through, for example, the Resilience and Recovery Fund, for which 20% has been reserved for use in digital areas, of which health is, of course, a key and important one. So I would hope to see over the next few years, that regions and countries, they're reviewing their health and care systems and thinking, where does the investment need to go, and using these resources, for example, to uptake the common frameworks, or to boost the capacity, whether it's in terms of cloud or data processing skills or just equipment. The skills of the health professionals and the literacy of people, because I think the point about literacy is indeed really very important. And if we can create an environment where people really do feel empowered to use their data, have the tools to use their data, they have the literacy to data, then I think it's another boost to this digital transformation, because people will have very tangible reasons to see how the data is working for them. And I think that will be a very big boost to the system developing as a whole.
Thank you very much. So empowering people by by using some financial resources, by collaboration, and by thinking about artificial intelligence and healthcare area as a social good, results of this as a social good. So I think it's the message from our discussion. Thank you very much to all of you. It was an excellent discussion, and thank you very much to all people who put your questions and actively participated in the debate. And now we can invite all of you for the next panel discussion in this conference, European Artificial Intelligence Policy Conference. What should be in Europe's AI, artificial intelligence legislation? So we will see what will be in the legislation. Thank you very much and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Good day, everyone.